This week on the Stylish Wellness podcast, I want to talk to you about how to organise your clothes using a specific framework that I have created, which helps you get the maximum wear out of all your clothes. This is the Stylish Wellness podcast with me, Sarah Banks. Today on the Stylish Wellness podcast, I'm going to talk to you about a framework that I have created, which is called the 70-20-10 image rule. And this rule, in inverted commas, because of course it's created, you don't have to obey it. It's a rule, but you don't have to obey it. Has been created because I wanted to give a framework to women to help them have the right balance of clothes in their wardrobe. And what I realised was, having listened to some of you talk about your wardrobes and the struggles that you have with them, is that you have some of the right clothes in your wardrobe, but some of the wrong clothes in your wardrobe as well. And some of those clothes are probably perfectly lovely, but as you will see, as I explain to you what this framework is, they're just not the right clothes for you in your wardrobe at this time in your life. So the 70-20-10 framework goes like this. The 70 means 70% of your wardrobe. And the 70 applies to what we are going to call your primary image. So let's identify what your primary image is. By primary image, I mean your primary external image. As a rule of thumb, our primary image generally conforms to the role we spend most of our time undertaking. So, do you spend most of your time at work, or at home, or in the park walking dogs, or looking after children, or whatever it is that you spend most of your time doing, say 70% of your time, that we're going to call that your primary image. Now, I understand, of course, that very few people conform to just one overall image. The roles that we undertake in our lives vary, and we have varied lives, and in those varied lives we undertake lots of different tasks, and we have relationships with lots of different people, and our lives are varied. But for the purposes of this exercise, what I want you to do is just identify what you spend most of your time doing. And this is not a trick question. It's not supposed to be a hard question. If you work full time, it's going to be work, because that will take up pretty much 70% of your week. And just to remind you again, these are these images, this primary image represents something that you do. So are you a florist? Are you a mother? Are you a nurse, a lawyer, a fire person, a judge, a journalist, a carer? I was going to say fireman then and apply it to both men and women. Like, we use the word man, but actually it applies across the sexual divide. And then I said fire person, and it sounds wrong because that sort of sounds like somebody who starts a fire. Oh, they're a fire person, they start a fire. So I hope you understand what I meant, which is a person who works for the fire brigade and as one of our essential services. So let's have an example of what your primary image could be. Say you are an architect. If you're an architect, you will most likely dress differently for work than you would if you're an accountant. I know this is a generalization, but just bear with me. So your primary image, say, is architect. Then think about the way that you dress as an architect. You can probably dress in a creative, arty, fashion-forward way with a modern, smart look for client and site meetings. So your primary image is going to be creative, arty, fashion-forward, modern, smart. Therefore, 70% of the clothes, shoes, accessories and jewellery that you wear needs to conform to that primary image. Ideally, you will put outfits together for work from 70% of your wardrobe. And this is where I think, going back to the women who've shared with me some of the struggles that they have in getting dressed and finding the right clothes to wear each day, I think that this is one area that women don't understand to look into enough. So you might think that you've got a certain number of dresses and trousers and tops and skirts, but actually if you're working full time, that's 5 days out of 7, and that is what you're going to spend most of your time doing. So your primary focus should be for that 70%, say, to be your work clothes, but it shouldn't be 100% and it shouldn't be 90% either, as we'll talk about shortly. So what you're aiming for is 70% of your wardrobe, if you work full-time as an architect, to be that modern, trendy, fashion-forward kind of look that female architects often have, with those very directional suits sometimes and beautifully constructed dresses. So that's the 70. Then let's look at the 20. This is the next common activity you undertake. After your main activity, if that's, for example, work, then if you're a parent, this 20% may be that you're a mother, maybe that you're a wife. 20% of your wardrobe should be clothes suitable for parenting, clothes that you enjoy wearing and that are suitable for wearing when you're with your children. If you're single, this 20% might be your leisure time. If you're a sports fanatic or a dance fan, then it might be your hobby. Whatever it is, allocate 20% of your wardrobe to it. And the last amount, the 10%, is allocated to the remaining group of activities you undertake, grouped. So if you spend 10% of your free time, say, in yoga classes, lucky you, you would expect to have 10% of your clothing devoted to great yoga wear. So there should be 10% of your wardrobe from which you can put outfits together to wear for yoga. If 10% of your time, so if you work full time, that's 70, and then you're a mother or a housewife or whatever for 20% of the time, and then 10% you have a very active social life, but you are working full time, then only 10% of your clothes should be going out clothes. Even though you may want to have more than that because it's fun to get dressed up. I know it's fun to get dressed up. But for the sake of argument and for this framework, it would be 10% because actually you're spending the least amount of time doing it. Now that you have your 70, 20, 10 images in your mind and you know what you're allocating those 70, 20, 10 portions to, what I would really love you to do is to take your clothes out of your wardrobe and create 3 piles of clothes according to the 70, 20, 10 principle. I think this would be a really interesting exercise for you to do, that you take everything out and you put it into piles according to the 3 different images that you have stated that you undertake, the 70, 20, 10 framework. Because, for example, you might discover that you don't have enough clothes for your 70% allocation and that you have too many for your 20% allocation. And then you're discovering something interesting about yourself there, which is that you're not allocating enough clothes to the 70%. Therefore, you might feel frustrated on a regular basis because you can't find clothes in your wardrobe that you want to wear, that you haven't just worn yesterday, that feel a bit different, that feel a bit interesting. Whereas if you have more clothes for the 20%, you probably don't wear those all the time. You're probably able to ring the changes and to not have to repeat an outfit for a very long time. And that actually is an unequal balance in your wardrobe because you're not really getting the cost per wear out of all your clothes. Because if you've got not enough clothes to wear for the 70%, but you've actually got too many for the 20%, then actually that 20% section, you're not wearing those clothes adequately. It might also indicate something else about your wardrobe and about you that you might not be aware of. And I think this is also a very interesting thing, which is that if you have a very big disparity between, say for example, you're 70 and you're 10, that you actually have, say, an equal number of clothes for the 70 and 10, or even you might have more clothes for the 10% than you do for the 70% allocation. It could indicate that you are not entirely happy in the balance of your life. In fact, I would suggest that that is possibly the case. So if you have many more clothes for your 10% allocation, it probably is because your focus is there and your mind is there and probably your heart is there as well. And that's probably why you're buying clothes for it. You find it easy and enjoyable and very freeing. And if you're not allocating enough to your 70%, then it could be that you don't actually enjoy that 70% as much as you do the 10%. And although this podcast is not a podcast that is here primarily to encourage you to hand your notice in and explore new territories and new horizons, if there is a big disparity in your clothing allocation from this 70-20-10 framework, then I would just ask yourself whether there are changes that you want to make, or whether it's just simply a question of wardrobe imbalance and that you perhaps find it easier to shop for your 10% than you do for your 70%. That could equally be true. But I just want to put it out there that it is possible that you're not buying clothes for your 70% if you see that they're lower than they should be, less than 70% of your wardrobe, because actually in some way you don't want to engage in that work any more than you absolutely have to. So you come home, you get changed, you switch off, you go and do something else, maybe your 20% activity, and that actually you're not really enjoying what you do for 70% of the time. So I'm just putting it out there. Providing that you have the right balance of clothes, which is an interesting task in itself, then from that 70% collection of clothes, what I think would be fantastic for you to do is to create different outfits that you can wear on a regular basis from that 70% collection. And if you've got the patience to photograph them and know that you have them ready, that would be truly a really great way of being organized in your wardrobe. And then the final aspect of that is that the night before you go to bed, that you pull out one of these outfits and you're ready to wear them the next day. That is pretty much the whole process of how to have an organized wardrobe, how to wear all your clothes, how to have the right balance of clothes, and how to be prepared in what you're going to wear each and every day, and avoid the early morning scramble of, is the jacket clean? Are all the buttons on? All that kind of thing. That is a perfect clothing arc that I've just given you right there, that I really encourage you to do. There is one other step which I haven't really mentioned, but I'll just mention it now because you can do it and I think it's a great idea, but I know you're busy so you might not have time. And that is when you put the outfits together from that 70% pile, that you photograph them and then print them out, and then you've got them. Actually, these days, you can easily photograph them and print them out at home. It doesn't need a Polaroid camera, or you don't need to take the photos in to be developed or anything like that. So you could easily just snap away on your phone and then put them all on one sheet, put all the images on one sheet or a couple of sheets, and then print them off. I think that would actually be a great idea. If you're really busy though, or do not want to do that, I don't think that's a necessity. That's a nice to have. But other than that I think for this week is your perfect clothing arc. So of course, once you've done the 70%, then it's over to you to do the 20% and the 10%. Like you've done with the 70%, take the 20% selection of clothes and create outfits out of that 20%. And then do the same for the 10%, which is create outfits out of those. So I suppose that a good demarcation of how many outfits you could create is, say out of 100% of your wardrobe, you can create 10 outfits. Well, you can probably create more than that, but say 10 for the sake of maths. That means I would expect you to be able to create 7 outfits from your work clothes, 2 outfits from your 20%, and 1 outfit from your 10%. But I think most of us could probably get 20 outfits out of our wardrobe. So therefore, you'd go 14, 4, and 2. So for your 20%, you should be able to get 4 outfits. And for your 10%, you should be able to get 2 outfits. Even as I say that, I think you could probably get 3 out of your 10%, even though that's not strictly right by the percentages. But I think you should be able to get 3. It depends really what you've already got in your wardrobe. The other thing that the 70-20-10 framework really highlights is the balance within the categories. So perhaps less so with the 70% because you've got more clothes. But for example, say you work full time and then you're a mother, and then your 10% is free time. And that 10%, your free time, you're allocating those clothes to going out and seeing friends, entertaining, for example. Well, given that I've only allocated you 10% of your wardrobe to wear for that, you'll need to make sure that those clothes do work for you, because that 10%, there's not a lot of room for maneuver. But of course, you remember that that's only 10% of your time. So it's not like you're spending 70% of your time doing these activities. It's just a small amount of time. So if you work full time and have children as well, and you've got the family, then your entertaining might be, you might see a friend midweek, do something on a Friday night, and then see friends during the weekend. Well, that's going to be maybe jeans and a nice dress, and then something sensible if you're seeing friends with children. Although the children category of clothing can go in the 20% because that's the family area. But it's a good way of dividing everything out, because it will really show you where you've got gaps, and it will really also show you that your clothes need to work for you, and that there isn't room for lazy clothes. There's no room for lazy clothes in your wardrobe. Lazy clothes need to go, and lazy clothes are clothes that don't get worn very often for whatever reason. They might be very nice, but they don't fit you. They might look beautiful, but they're not comfortable. They might be the wrong size. They might be the wrong colour. And if you do the 70-20-10 framework, you will realise that actually if you only have 10% of your clothes to wear for entertaining and going out, it's not going to be that dress that you really like, but it doesn't suit you. And so therefore you'll be quite happy. You should be quite happy about just letting it go, because you don't need it in your wardrobe. Because if you've only got 10% that you can wear, you'd better replace it really with something you really want to wear. Because otherwise by keeping that dress, you're reducing your options to 8 or 9%. And then that's even less, do you see? So this is quite a clever way of doing it, because it will really highlight what you need in your wardrobe and what you don't need. And anything that you've been wavering on, you'll probably be more inclined to get rid of. Instead of which, what we normally do, you see, is we don't divide our clothes up like this. We just think, oh, I'll go and get something else. So instead of actually dealing with the clothes that we've got and saying, oh, that work shirt doesn't suit me very well, or it doesn't feel very comfortable, or it always becomes untucked, or it gapes a bit at the front, instead of just tolerating it or going to get another shirt and then not getting rid of that first shirt, you just tolerate it. But if I said to you, well, you've got 70% of your wardrobe you can have for your work every day, that's day in, day out, Monday to Friday, you won't keep that shirt because you'll want to wear something else. And also, I think something else that it will show you is if you don't have enough of something. So, for example, you might be existing on one tried and tested jacket, but when you look at that 70% and you're putting outfits together, you're going to have to, if you've only got the one jacket, you're going to have to pair it with everything. Well, that becomes a bit dull, doesn't it? So that will indicate to you that you actually do need to go and get another jacket, that actually for that 70%, you should have more than one jacket. In fact, I don't know why I choose sevens so much, but the blog posts that I've written on creating a work capsule wardrobe for yourself, those that initial creation of the capsule wardrobe, that's create a capsule wardrobe of 7 outfits that you really like in under an hour without buying any new clothes. And I think I suggest 1 jacket in there in 7 clothes. So I'll put the link in the show notes. But if you haven't read that blog post, then do check it out. And actually, I think I have created that blog post as a podcast. I think it's Create a Work Capsule Wardrobe That You Love or something like that. I think that is already a podcast. So you could look that one out as well. So that is, there are 2 more things I want to say about this 70-20-10 framework. You can also use it for your accessories. And I think this is a really clever thing to do. So mostly we have all our jewellery jumbled up together, or we've got some in a leather box and some in a little jewellery chest and some in a zip-up pot and some in a pull out in a drawer somewhere and some in a basket and what have you. And so we might have our jewellery all over the place. But on a rainy weekend day, when you've got an hour or so, get it all out, all your jewellery, and see if you can divide that up into 70-20-10 as well. See how that divides out. And I think that is quite interesting. I wouldn't be so strict about that though, because I think it's lovely to have, like I'm still working full time, and I love at the weekend to have chunky jewellery and interesting things to wear. So I would definitely have more than 10% at the weekends for my clothes, for my casual clothes, my weekend relaxing clothes. My jewellery is probably more than 10%. But interestingly, I probably am never wearing 10%. So there are some things that I sort of archive off for a little while, for a couple of years, and then I bring them back in. So I think that you could probably do your jewellery as 70-20-10, and maybe choose, say, that number of items, and then maybe put the others away for a little bit, and then ring the changes next year and swap them over. But I think 70-20-10 is quite good, because then you'll wear everything. And similarly with shoes, I think is a really good one. So all other forms of accessories to the clothes, like shoes, belts, scarves, that would be interesting for you to do 70-20-10 as well. I think with scarves and coats, there is more of a crossover. I think that's totally fine. I think with shoes, you probably don't want to wear your work shoes at the weekend. So you probably do need to make sure that you have 70-20-10 for your work shoes. But I know for myself that I think if I did 70-20-10 on my shoes, I don't think I would have enough work shoes. But I think that's probably a legacy of COVID, because I stopped buying and wearing work shoes for a couple of years, and I was wearing sandals and high heels, and then around the house I wasn't really wearing anything when we were all at home. So that's probably a legacy of COVID, and I probably need to do some shopping around that at some point. And then the final thing I want to say is that I've used 70-20-10 as a framework because it's a very easy way of dividing up your wardrobe. But I do know that for some of you, you will work part-time and you'll be at home part-time. And so if this is the case, then if you are part-time, like 2.5 or 3 days a week, and then the rest of the time you're at home, I would divide that 70 in half. So give 35 to one activity and 35 to your other activity or primary image. Or I might go 40-30 instead, and just give a bit more weighting to the work. That's totally fine. So the 70% represents what you do for most of the time. But if you don't work full time, or you're not at home full time, then that's fair enough to split up that 70% and make it 35% or 40-30. And of course, if you're how I divided it up, for example, was work was my primary, family is my secondary, and entertaining and sport is my third, is my 10% image. But if you've got, so for example, so if I was working part-time and my primary image therefore was split between work and family life, the 35 of the family life from the primary image would actually get attached to the 20 of my secondary one and actually make it a bigger allocation. So therefore I would see that my family life was actually ultimately my primary image because the work is ultimately smaller. I think I've made that clear. Hope I've made that clear. Yes, so I think that is the 70-20-10 framework. And I really hope that you find that useful and it's given you some food for thought and perhaps made you realize that now you understand why there are areas in your life that you struggle to find something that you want to wear and other areas in your life where you don't have any problem at all, probably because you have about 20 pairs of jeans for your 10% allocation. You've got too many clothes in your smaller allocation. And I wouldn't be brutal about getting rid of things. If you realize that you've got too many in a smaller category, I would wear them all for a while and just keep an eye, create the outfits and keep an eye on what you want to keep, and then maybe dispose of something if you feel that is the right thing to do. I think the 70-20-10 framework, I would be, if I were doing it for the first time, I would be interested to see whether I had got the right combination of clothes within 70-20-10. So for my primary image of being at work, have I got enough clothes to create 7 outfits? And do I have the right combination of clothes? I think that's what I would be looking for immediately. It's not primarily an exercise in getting rid of clothes from your wardrobe. Although, of course, if you do want to get rid of clothes and you realize that you've got 10 pairs of jeans and that are all the same. So you've got 20 pairs of jeans and 10 of them are just so similar. And there are 2 of them that have still got the tags on and they're still folded up. Well, that is an indication, isn't it, that you don't need them. You just don't need them in your wardrobe. So it's not primarily an exercise in trying to get rid of your clothes, but it is an exercise in making sure that you've got the right clothes in your wardrobe and that you're wearing all of your clothes and that you're getting good cost per wear out of them and that you don't have any lazy clothes in there that are not paying for their cost per wear and that are not functioning correctly for you, because that's what it's all about. And don't feel worried about giving your clothes away to a charity shop or to a friend, because as someone once said to me, your leech is someone else's lily. I thought that was very funny. It applies to everything. It applies to ex-boyfriends, ex-friends, and clothes you no longer need. And perhaps jobs too. Your leech is someone else's lily. The thing that doesn't suit you may suit someone else perfectly. So on that note, on that very happy leech and lily analogy, I'm going to leave you. And thank you for being with me again this week for another episode of the Stylish Wellness Podcast. And I look forward to seeing you here, same place, same time next week. And have a great week. Bye for now.